A mysterious virus has wiped out all humans, leaving Philip Miller as the last man on Earth. For a year, he has been alone, searching for other people across the entire country. He visits every state, makes announcements in empty cities, and even takes items from museums. After realizing he can't find anyone, Philip decides to go back to his hometown, Tucson. He tries one last time to find someone by putting "Alive in Tucson" on billboards around the city. Back at his rundown apartment, he packs his things and moves into a big house in a fancy neighborhood, declaring it his new home. He spends days decorating with valuable items like famous paintings, a White House mat, and a dinosaur skull, having fun with the luxurious loot. Every night, he apologizes to God for his habits and wishes he could see a woman before he dies. With many cars still available, he drives around in his underwear and breaks into a grocery store using a gun. He has forgotten the basics of kindness since there's no one to impress. He does crazy things like knocking over cans in the store and bringing home adult movies to entertain himself. He plays racquetball by himself, uses lamps and fish tanks as bowling pins, and crashes cars for fun. The chaos gives him a bit of excitement but also reminds him of his loneliness. On his birthday, he feels sad about everything he took for granted in normal life. He misses his mother and other people. Months later, his grand mansion has turned into a messy site with trash everywhere because he doesn't clean up. It feels pointless. He hasn't showered in days and lives in terrible conditions. The house doesn't have running water, so he uses the pool as a toilet after making a hole in the springboard. He even fills a kiddie pool with margaritas to drink and bathe in at the same time, hoping he doesn't get the two pools mixed up. One day, Philip goes to a bar and draws faces on some balls, giving them names and personalities. He talks to them as if they are his real friends because he feels lonely. At night, he takes a ball named Gary to a clothing store and tries to flirt with a mannequin he likes. When the mannequin's arm breaks, Philip gets really upset and decides he doesn't want to live anymore. He goes to a nearby hill to end it all, saying goodbye to his ball friends and promising to remember them. He then gets in his car and drives fast towards the hill. Suddenly, he sees smoke in the distance and stops just in time before crashing. Curious, he follows the smoke and finds a trailer where someone lives. He sees a bra hanging outside, smells it, and feels overwhelmed, fainting. When he wakes up, a pretty girl is holding him. She kisses him and says she will grant his wishes. Philip enjoys the kiss until he realizes he's dreaming. When he wakes up for real, the girl is older and not as pretty. She is giving him CPR. They both feel awkward seeing each other after a long time. Philip asks about the beautiful woman, but she tells him to worry about his wet pants instead. He had accidentally peed himself while unconscious. Philip tries to explain that he was swimming, but this makes the girl panic, and she gets a gun, telling him to stay away. Finally, Philip admits he did pee himself and feels embarrassed. Once they both calm down, they introduce themselves. The girl's name is Carol. She used to be an analyst before a virus killed most people and has been traveling around America, looking for survivors. She saw a sign for life in Tucson and came to check if she was really the last person alive. Even though Philip was excited to meet a woman, he isn't too thrilled about Carol. She keeps correcting his grammar, doesn't get his jokes, and talks about random things. After chatting for a while, they decide to drive to the grocery store. On the way, Carol complains about Philip running a stop sign, even though he argues there's no traffic. She insists they must follow the rules so they don't start living like animals. He stops at a sign and checks both ways to make sure no one is crossing the road. Carol keeps bothering him even when they get to the grocery store, where Philip parks in a handicapped spot. They argue about it for the fifth time that day, with Philip saying the imaginary handicapped person has plenty of space, while Carol wants him to park elsewhere. He drives the car right into the store. Later, Carol visits his house and is shocked by how messy it is. He has two swimming pools, one full of waste and the other with trash. Carol accuses him of stealing paintings, but he says they didn't belong to anyone anymore. After the tour, he tells her to go back to her campsite. The next morning, Carol wakes him up while cleaning his house. She tells him to buy gardening and cleaning supplies so they can live better. At night, Philip meets up with his friends and complains about Carol. Even though he only met her a day ago, he feels like they are already a couple who need a divorce. The next morning, things get worse when she moves into the house next door. He tries to send her away, but she insists. She asks if he's scared of being seen naked, and he takes off his pants in response. Then, Carol brings up having kids, saying they have a duty to repopulate the earth. Philip tells her he wouldn't sleep with her even if she were the last woman on earth, and he really means it. Later, while he's outside, Carol asks him to help get running water for their houses so they can grow fruits. When he refuses, she tries to bribe him with fresh tomatoes, but he doesn't care. She should know better than to try to bribe a guy who uses an outdoor toilet. However, that night, he sneaks into her garden and eats all her vegetables. The next morning, Carol knocks on his door and finds him covered in leftover tomatoes. Philip still says he didn't take them. Carol hurt her leg while trying to bring water from a manhole to her house. A few days later, she gives up on living a normal life. Philip finds her making a toilet outside in a fountain, just like like the one by his swimming pool. Carol feels like they are not special but instead forgotten people with no purpose, unable to build a proper life even in their fancy homes. Philip, who usually sees Carol as positive, feels sorry for her. He goes to a water tank in the city to get water for her garden. Carol is happy and invites him to dinner. Philip enjoys a healthy meal, and they start talking about sex. He says he's ready to sleep with her, but to his surprise, Carol wants to wait until they are married. At first, he thinks she's joking, but she is serious. Even though it seems strange, he decides to propose to make her happy. They agree to get married the next day. In the next scene, they are at a church saying their vows. Philip thinks the wedding isn't necessary but goes along with it. When they leave the church, a crowd greets them, and Philip realizes he made a mistake. Suddenly, he wakes up in his bed, relieved it was just a dream, and checks outside to see that most of the world is still dead. Later, Carol comes to his house with food and suggests they should elect a president. Although it seems pointless, Philip announces himself as president and wins by default. They share a meal of spaghetti and raisin balls, which Carol thinks is a good substitute for meatballs. Finally, the wedding day arrives. Carol decorates and prepares a cake, while Philip is supposed to get the rings. Instead, he throws a party for his friends and burns things in a parking lot. He even says goodbye to a mannequin, calling her his true love. At the end of the day, he goes to the church where Carol has prepared a recording to officiate their wedding. After some quick promises, it's time to exchange rings, but Carol finds out that Philip didn't bring any. She realizes she's the only one trying, so she calls off the wedding. Later, Philip knocks on her door to talk, but she doesn't answer, so he breaks the door down with a hammer. Inside, he's surprised to see that Carol decorated the place and made a cake with his statue on top. Philip feels terrible and apologizes. He admits that he doesn't really like her personality or cooking, but he's happy she's in his life because he wouldn't be alive without her. Then, he takes her to a jewelry store where she picks out all the rings she wants. They finally get married and become husband and wife. That night, when they try to be intimate, it's not what Philip expected because Carol talks a lot and makes strange comments. The next morning, he's playing racquetball at home, thinking she'll bother him, but instead, she joins in and they have fun. They spend the day doing adventurous things like making fireproof suits and setting each other on fire, running over beer cans with a bulldozer, and visiting Philip's ex-girlfriend, who is a mannequin. Carol talks to her and even punches her for flirting with Philip. For the first time, Philip is happy he married her and thinks their life might be okay. But as they drive home, they accidentally crash into a limo, and when a beautiful woman steps out, Philip starts to regret his marriage. To find out what happens next, watch the second part on our new channel.